which is approximately $5 billion to $5.50 billion. And Bangladesh is our neighboring country. You can understand, if the logistic cost in our country, you will be surprised to know the logistic cost is around 8 to 10%. It is the third largest cost in the balance sheet of a company. First material, second payroll, and third is logistics. Against standard logistic cost is around 3 to 4%. So, export to Bangladesh is a challenge. Any moment of time, you will find 1,500 trucks are on the queue. How will you grow? How exports can grow? This is one of the major reasons. Second reason is that taxations. I am talking about the pre-GST period. In the pre-GST period, having a factory in East means you are adding cost to the extent of 4 to 5% as compared to an industry located in West or North. What is the basic reason? Reason was, in East, you have to bring 90% of the raw materials from other states. It is a raw material deficient states. For example, West Bengal. What is available here? Tea, coffee, and jute. You just examine yourself that whatever goods you are using today, how much is produced in East? Which meant that raw materials will come here. You will have a central sales tax which is not available as credit. You will have entry tax which is not available as credit. Bringing logistic cost from West and North, that is transportations, adding to the cost. And 85% of the market is located outside East. Any company, you see the balance sheet, 85%. That means bring the material back to the market, again logistic cost, again taxations. And the tax which you will charge, it will not be available to the customer. Is it clear to you? So, please don't blame that it is because of the political reasons. Political problems are there every state. But this was a practical reason. Now, with the implementations of the GST, the taxation divergence is now in the history. It is only a problem of logistic cost, and once we are able to reduce the logistic cost, according to me, East will grow like anything. But again that, for industry, they always try to be closer to the raw material, and secondly, they would like to be close to the market. So, be closer to the market is also important. You might feel that why my market is always available? West Bengal has around 9 crore people. It is no way less than Maharashtra. It is no way less than North. Then why you are talking about the market? Why materials are to be brought to the North or West? 65% of the materials are sold in North and West, out of which 35% in North, 30% are West, 20% in South. Why I have to bring? Please understand that you might have 9 crore people, but you have to examine their effective consumptions, their capability to consume more. So population does not indicate your consumption history. You may have huge populations, but consumption may not be commensurate to that because it depends on the earning capacity. So therefore, according to me, if Northeast or East has to be developed, apart from the manufacturing side, more and more attention to be given in the service industry, which Mr. Bauri has correctly stated. We have to grow here with service industry. We can grow in the tourism, we can grow in the professional areas, like in the education segment, which can grow tremendously because there is no question of market, there is no question of logistic cost, and we have a good amount of skilled labor. Apart from that, yeah, I'll just take 2 minutes time, 1 minute time. Our law enforcement has to be very effective. If you see the agreement with any Northeast countries or Northeast, you will find the arbitration place is invariably in Singapore, Hong Kong or Japan, Tokyo, and not India. I have made several agreements with my own company, with my own parent company. They said, no, India should not be. Place of arbitration will be Singapore. Why they want that? Because here law enforcement takes long time. This needs to be expedited. Arbitrations is one of, mostly all international disputes are settled through arbitrations. The arbitrations and enforcement of the arbitration order is very, very important. So with this, while we should certainly look into the industrial segments, but industry has certain bottlenecks which we have to recover. Partially we have recovered because of the GST, but service segment is a C area where we can really throw our complete focus and grow. And that is the way Northeast and East can grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Mr. Chatterjee's speech kind of leads me into mine because I am going to talk about the service industry and something so far that has not been addressed other than our Honorable IT Minister, Mr. Debashish Sen. So I represent the technology industry or the IT industry or the software industry as it's known as. And as rightly pointed out, there are states like Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and others, even down south and north and west, where there is a lot of boom that has happened in the software industry. There's no reason why we cannot have it here. It's done to death when people, and even when in our West Bengal presentation we have IITs, IIMs, NITs, world-class education, tier 1 colleges. If that be the case, ISI, if that be the case, then why are we failing to attract the software and keep the software industry here, which is, you don't need road transportation, you do not need infrastructure of that nature. And again, the Southeast Asia, especially as a market, is exceptionally lucrative. If you look at the technology scene today in the world, the Western markets are pretty saturated. So what is happening with all the startups and all the companies, their focus is now on Asia. And there is a huge war that has ensued between the Western world and the Chinese of providing cheap technology services into the Southeast Asia market. One, of course, because there is an exploding middle class, which is, the number in terms of the middle class, I think it's about, if I can refer, it's about collectively about 600 to 900 million people. So that's a huge consumer base. And this consumer base is driven largely from online digital transactions. So the online transactions and the ad revenue in itself has kind of created some of these huge small startups to huge startups. You've heard about Alibabas and all of them, Amazons of the world. And Southeast Asia is a huge market. One of the things that's happening is, of course, the price points at which this service is offered. Imagine with our global proximity, especially the East and the Northeast, global proximity to the Southeast Asian countries, and the need there, plus the homogeneity in terms of culture. There is a lot of cultural synergies between our country and that country. There is a lot of, the consumer behavior patterns are very similar. So there is no reason where we cannot harness the software that is being delivered to manage those kinds of, that entire industry that is booming out there. I think last year alone, there has been transactions in the level of $100 billion USD online, just simple online transactions. And about 600 million people spending and rising consumer base. So all of this actually is given our education system, our synergy in terms of our social, the consumer behavior pattern, understanding of that, and the ability and the geographical proximity. There is no reason we cannot build this software industry or the technology industry out of the Northeast and the East and Calcutta. Because you actually do not, all you need is an infrastructure which is the back end. And talking about the infrastructure at the back end, I'm not only talking about just the software. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this new cloud technology. Cloud is nothing but a remote data center. You don't have to have it in your location. Just the sheer volume of business that can be generated through setting up these vast data centers and managing and maintaining them, it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity given those countries and, the how do I say it, the other influences in terms of, tsunamis and natural disasters happening. This place can be a very, very good positioning geographically for large cloud centers, other than the fact of building those applications, managing those applications, and creating a startup ecosystem. We are very good in software. And the Southeast Asian countries are extremely good in hardware, in manufacturing very cheap hardware. So I think there could be a huge synergy in this entire region to build up this industry and sustain it. Some of the areas I addressed about the cloud, and Sri Debasi Sen this morning talked about AI, talked about fintech. These are exactly there has been a fintech boom in the last 3 years where Western, the sheer volume actually generated probably more than 500 to 600 creation of companies in the Southeast Asia by Western counterparts. But they failed. One of the reasons is competition, fierce competition, and the price points in providing services in the localized, which we actually can. We can sustain that kind of price points. And another is, there is another segment which was the non-B2C segment, which is the B2B segment, which actually nobody is looking into. So there is as I said, there is an exploding middle class, so there is a generation. So things like insurance management, wealth management, these kinds of fintech solutions have yet not penetrated in those areas where even people are very wary to come in, given the price points and the competition. These are very ripe, industries that we can actually leverage and harness. And given what our IT minister recognizes, what I heard this morning, I hope this is one of the segments that we can really build up, and it will be a very, the time to market will be short, the TCO would be very good, and we already have the brain power to make it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Last speaker of the session is Mr. Thapar, who represents Hindustan Lever. Hindustan Lever is the company investing in the Northeast, so we will hear from him his experiences and what sort of challenges company is facing there. Thank
Sure.
you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I'd like to thank the Bengal Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Senator K for extending the invitation to Hindustan Unilever to be a part of this August gathering. I'm conscious as the last speaker on this panel, I'm actually standing between the session and lunch and a lunch break, so I'll try and be really brief. But what I want to do in the next couple of minutes really is emphasize how we at Hindustan Unilever see the growing and rising importance of the East of India in our business and are very strongly committed to investing in this region. So let me give you a little bit of a background in Unilever as we operate in South Asia. So as South Asia, Unilever is about a €6 billion business, 75-80% of which comes from India. We operate with companies in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, which is a subsidiary of India, and the Indian operation. You're familiar with the company and our brands, I'm not going to get into that detail, but to let you know that we think the opportunity within India is clearly very exciting, and you see that reflected in the way we do business. Within that, the east of India is a very, very integral and very pivotal part of our operation. It's about 15% of our business. So 15% of our business comes from the east of India. And I have to tell you that in the last couple of years, that's been really important because the growth that we've been seeing in this region relative to the rest of the country is clearly ahead of the averages. So we've been growing faster in the east in the last couple of years. And that's coming on the back of clearly a lot of opportunity that we see as markets and consumers in this part of the world evolve. Clearly, as the trend to premiumize starts to play out, we are investing significantly in growing our distribution access to consumers, to retail outlets, and in really offering new varieties of products and segments that will help grow the market. So clearly, a very pivotal part of our business coming in from the east of India. Now, that's one part of it. If you look at our presence in the east of India, and I want to talk about this because it is talking about the attractiveness of the business, and you see it reflected in our growing footprint. We've been in the east and the northeast for almost a century now. You know, last year we actually commemorated 100 years of our Garden Reach factory, which really manufactures soaps products. We have a factory in Kidarpur, which has been around from 1965 and is by far the largest tea blending unit in the Unilever world. 85% of the tea that we buy is actually sourced from West Bengal and Assam. And it therefore will give you a sense of just how important this region is to our business. We have a unit which is in Haldia, which we put up in 2001, which manufactures detergent powders. And then we have a huge manufacturing complex with 4 units in Dumduma up in Assam, starting in 2001. And the most recent investment in the 4th unit is what we commissioned in March this year, which manufactures personal products. It's a state-of-the-art facility. So it just gives you a sense that across the breadth of our business, we are really well invested in the east and the northeast of India, right across all our businesses, from soaps and detergents to beverages and to our personal products and personal care business. So very clearly, a lot going over here, and thanks to some, one of course is what we see as the large opportunity in the marketplace as that market evolves, but also what I call and consider some fantastic relationships with the local authorities and the communities, which has enabled us really go and invest behind each of the projects that I've just told you. Now, as we've done that, if I just tie back to our larger mission, which as a company is, we're a consumer company, so it's really about brands which help consumers look good, feel good, and get more out of life. But inherent in that mission is also a philosophy which is about doing well by doing good. It is about creating value whilst living the values as a responsible corporate citizen. So therefore, in a lot of that I've spoken to you about, we are also working very closely with local communities really to improve health and hygiene standards, to promote sustainable sourcing. For example, with the Tea Board of India, we are working on a program which is called Trust Tea, with an extended ecosystem which is really about driving sustainable practices in tea. How do you really drive competitiveness of Indian tea, and how do you really ready small tea farmers and growers to really match exacting standards of quality and scrutiny as this economy and as the tea industry really opens up. We work with Rainforest Alliance on certification, and then there are a host of other social programs that we are involved in. And why do we do this? Because we do this knowing fully well that as we grow, the sustainability angle and really making sustainable living commonplace is just so inherent in our role as a corporate citizen as we grow. Therefore, if I had to summarize a couple of points that I want to leave you with, as Hindustan Unilever Limited, we see a lot of opportunity in the northeast and the east of India. We're clearly committed to investments over here. We've just seen it reflected, and as these markets grow, clearly that is a great opportunity for us to be able to invest further. What are some of the things which could really accelerate, given the fact that these markets are already accelerating, but what are some of the things that could really aid that development and that acceleration of market growth? Could really be infrastructure improvements. I'm not going to belabor the point, you just heard the point on logistics costs. How do we really make this part of the country really cost competitive so that it starts to serve markets beyond its immediate catchment, so it can start to serve markets outside of what is really the east of India and the core of the markets. So that's the first piece. I think, how do you really open up access to consumers and markets? And we've spoken a lot about corridors outside of India, neighboring countries, and keeping with the larger theme. But for a domestic flourishing business which has so much of opportunity, how do we really create improved access within the country, within the region, within the states? And that can in itself lend itself to fresh and newer horizons of opportunities. As a consumer company, schemes and programs which put more money into the hands of consumers and uplift the quality of living of consumers is anything which works well. And we've seen the multiplier effects of that happening on consumption and therefore economic development. And that's clearly something which we would like to leave as a thought behind. And the last piece is, clearly we spoke about, there was a dimension this morning which was presented on saying what really is a barometer of measuring economic growth. GDP is one, human development is the other piece. And therefore, it is just so important that as we talk about economic development, we also talk about human development. And as an organization, we're strongly committed to doing that. I did mention doing well by doing good is clearly an ethos that we live by. And therefore, we're strongly committed to programs which improve health and hygiene of people in the communities, of improving livelihoods. We have a program called Prabhat that we operate across a host of our sites, which is intended to improve livelihoods, skill upgradation. We've got research and development centers which is based out of Kolkata for tea, and clearly we are now investing in one technical development center up in Dumduma to really try and upskill a lot of the people in that area. And the last is, of course, this is clearly a large hub for tea, and we're taking the lead with a lot of the industry and the wider ecosystem to lead sustainable agricultural practices which will help drive the attractiveness, the competitiveness and compliance of Indian tea to clearly exacting quality standards. So really those are some thoughts that I'd like to leave you with of course the lasting thought saying, as HUL we are strongly committed to the east of India. You see it reflected in our operations. It is a large part of our business, and we're clearly excited by the even greater opportunity that this part of the country can bring in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kapar. So we have ended with the session. Before we end, just one line to summarize. I'm not going to stop you for the lunch, because you're more hungry for the food. When we look at this, the Actis policy, we have 3 pillars: culture, commerce and connectivity. All our panelists, starting with Mr. Bowry, and then Mr. Padmanabhan, Mr. Chatterjee, Mr. Mukherjee, and here the industry investors who are dealing with the technology software, where we have the northeast, the eastern part is the economic powers, the technology and software development, and the private sector investments in the processed food and other industries. So these are basically the strength of the region, And when you look at Look-East or Act-East or implementation of Act-East policy, they will come forward. They will drive the agenda of the East and Northeastern. So thank you very much for joining. Please have a round of applause to all of them. And before we hand over to them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Probir De, for this very, very interesting session. I'm sure everybody here, I hope that the people who are recording you on video put it up on YouTube so that all the thoughts that you've expressed, all the views that you've expressed can reach out to a wide audience. I will urge the Bengal Chamber to do this because I think the deliberations of this morning have been very, very insightful, and I'm sure a lot of people would gain and benefit even if they're not physically present here today. So my work is over. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor and my privilege. I now invite General Arun Roy to conclude the deliberations before we break for lunch. And Anguna will, of course, ensure that all our panelists and guests are given mementos. Please, General Roy.
Once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Somehow or the other, in most of the functions I get to speak late and I get blamed for cutting everybody's lunchtime. I'll try to be as brief as possible. This is neither a valedictory address nor is it a summation. I would not even dare to do it. However, I would speak about Senaske a little because I don't think very many people in this auditorium know about Senaske and how it was born, how it started existing, A. And B, I will leave some thoughts with you when you go for lunch. Somewhere about 2008, late 2008, a bunch of retired people and just retired people got together, 2007 I would say, got together over a drink and they said, we'll start a think tank. So, I had just retired. So yes, we'll start a think tank. So second drink comes, who will do the work? So they all looked at me. I was the youngest, just retired. Others had retired about some 4 times, and many of them are late, by the way, of that lot now. So I'm still the leg man, even after 8 years. So that is how it started. It was started as a non-funded, non-profit, fortunately tax exempt at some stage. We don't get funds from anywhere. Next day we all deposited 5 or 10,000 rupees amongst our people who said yes, and that is how it commenced. And this is where we have reached now. We hold roundtable discussion with foreign governments, representative of foreign governments. We hold major seminars like this about 4 or 5 times a year. We have held seminars in each and every state but Manipur in the northeast. We have held a seminar in Dhaka along with the Itihas Samilani, and we have